Story number 1. My name is Hassan, and as you are used to from my stories, my life is not ordinary. I always find myself in terrifying situations that I cannot explain. This time, the story was different because I was not alone. I was with 3 of my friends, Jimmy, Loza, and Jasmine. It was a night that we will never forget in the Siwa desert. We were in the car, the atmosphere was quiet, and darkness covered the horizon. As we made our way through the desert, everything started to seem strange. The area we reached was completely empty of life, incredibly dark. Suddenly the car stopped working completely and the electricity was cut off. Jimmy and I tried to fix the car to no avail, while Loza started to feel scared. She looked at us and said in a low voice, "Hassan, this place is not normal. I feel like someone is watching us." I tried to calm her down, but I felt the same feeling. Jasmine, who was usually so brave, began to show signs of nervousness and said, "Well, Jimmy, we need to move quickly. These sounds are not normal." As we tried to understand what was happening, the sounds began to become clearer. The sounds of cats meowing in an unnatural way and the howling of wolves that seemed to be approaching. Suddenly, Loza shouted, "I heard footsteps! Someone is walking around us." Everyone froze and we listened silently. Indeed, there was the sound of slow footsteps, but we did not see anything. At that moment, an old man appeared on the back of a donkey, slowly approaching us. His face was mysterious and his eyes were strange. When he asked us if we needed help, we agreed to go with him to his nearby house, even though everything seemed illogical. We walked about 2,000 meters behind the sheikh in the dark. Loza was holding my hand as if trying to hold herself together, but she whispered to me, "Hassan, I'm not comfortable. This place is scary and this sheikh is not normal." Jasmine, who was walking beside Jimmy, suddenly stopped and said, "I hear the sound of sheep, but where are the sheep? The sound is coming from every direction, but there is nothing around us." We tried to calm her down, but the truth is that our hearts were filled with fear. When we arrived at the house, it was very old. It looked like it had been abandoned for centuries. We entered with it, and the atmosphere became incredibly heavy. Jasmine stopped at the door and said, "I can't continue and there is something wrong here." We tried to convince her to enter, but as soon as she stepped inside the house, she looked at us and said, "Someone is standing in the corner. I saw something moving." We looked where she was pointing, but there was nothing. Suddenly the sheikh disappeared, as if the ground had swallowed him. The lights went out completely and we were in complete darkness. The sounds started to return, the sounds of cats and howling, but this time they were closer and clearer. Loza grabbed my hand and said, "Hassan, I can't breathe. I hear someone talking." Jasmine, who was trying to hold herself together, suddenly screamed, "Something touched me! Someone touched my hair!" As we tried to comprehend what was happening, Jimmy shouted, "Run fast!" We didn't think twice. We ran out of the house at top speed, while the sounds around us seemed to be chasing us. When we stopped to catch our breath, Jimmy was panting heavily and said, "I saw the sheikh, but he was something else and he was very tall and looked terrifying. His eyes were fire." Loza, who was trembling, said in a low voice, "I felt someone breathing in my ear and he was saying strange words." As for Jasmine, she was looking at the house from afar and said, "There is someone standing at the door. Look, that is the sheikh." We all looked in the direction she pointed, but there was nothing. We returned to the car, and it suddenly started working without any explanation. Jimmy drove the car at a crazy speed until we got out of the area. The whole way we were silent, none of us able to comprehend what had happened. For days after that night, Loza and Jasmine continued to hear strange voices in their dreams, while Jimmy saw the sheikh in his nightmares, smiling at him with a devilish smile. To this day, we do not know what happened in the Siwa desert that night. All we know is that we encountered something bigger than us, something that did not belong to our world. The Curse of the Dry Valley. Story number 2. My life is not normal. Sometimes I feel haunted by forces I cannot understand, as if I was born to experience horror in its most mysterious forms. What I am about to tell you happened to me and my close friend Jimmy in a dry river valley on the west bank of the ancient city of Thebes, modern Luxor. An experience I will never forget. The night was pitch black, and the air was dry as if it carried the whisper of ancient times. Jimmy and I decided to go on a little adventure after hearing local stories about an abandoned valley on the west bank, a valley that is said to have been an ancient river but dried up thousands of years ago and is rumored to be haunted by the spirits of the ancients. We arrived at the place in Jimmy's car. The road was bumpy and strangely silent. We stopped at the entrance of the valley and decided to go on foot. We were carrying 2 flashlights and a strange feeling took over us, a mixture of curiosity and fear. The deeper we went into the valley, the colder it got. Although it was summer, the heat suddenly disappeared, and it was as if we had entered another world. The rocks were forming strange shapes like faces watching us. Suddenly, Jimmy stopped and said in a troubled voice, "Well, do you see this?" I looked in the direction he was pointing, and I saw shadows moving between the rocks. At first, I thought it was just an illusion due to the lighting, but the shadows were moving consciously, as if they were watching us. I tried to reassure him, but the truth was that my heart was beating violently. We decided to move forward even though every part of my mind was screaming at me to turn back. As we walked, we noticed something on the ground, broken pottery and old jewelry scattered around. We realized that we were in an area that had probably not been trodden for centuries. Suddenly we felt a slight tremor under our feet, followed by a sound that sounded like a groan, but it wasn't human. We stopped in our tracks and our flashlights shone toward the source of the sound, and there we saw something I will never forget. A tall, shadow-like creature stood on a high rock. His head was abnormally distorted, and his hands extended exaggeratedly as if they were grasping air. His eyes shone with a dull red light. He began to move slowly towards the ground, as if gravity had no effect on him. Jimmy, who was usually brave, muttered in a trembling voice, "This isn't real, this isn't real." But the creature came closer, and his voice sounded like overlapping whispers in incomprehensible languages. I tried to move, but my body was paralyzed with terror. The creature stopped a few meters away from us and raised his hand, pointing towards a dark opening between the rocks. Without knowing why, we felt a strong urge to move towards that opening, as if an invisible force was guiding us. We entered and found ourselves in a wide cave, its walls filled with strange engravings and dim lights emanating from unknown sources. In the middle of the cave, there was a huge stone tomb engraved with pharaonic symbols that I had never seen before. Suddenly, the hole we had entered closed, and the ground began to shake violently. The creature was standing next to the tomb, pointing at it insistently. Jimmy shouted, "We have to get out! This place is cursed!" But before we could move, the lid of the tomb slowly opened, and a very bright light came out of it. I felt a severe headache, as if my soul was being pulled out of my body. Everything was spinning around me. Suddenly I found myself and Jimmy outside the cave, a few meters away from the car. We didn't talk, we didn't look back. We ran to the car and drove off at full speed. To this day, I don't know what we saw in that valley. All I know is that ancient spirits still guard their secrets, and that there are places in this world we should never enter. The Secret of the Great Pyramid. Story number 3. The situation where I was really dying of fear. The Great Pyramid has always been one of the places I dream of visiting in a different way, away from the crowds and tour guides. Once I decided to visit the pyramid at night, after one of the people working there convinced me that he could get me inside in a secret way at a time when the place is completely empty. A reckless idea? Sure, but enthusiasm got the better of me. As usual, we arrived before midnight, and the whole area was strangely quiet. The sound of the wind passing between the huge stones created a terrifying atmosphere on its own. The man who was with me opened a small side entrance for me and let me go in alone. He said to me, "I will wait here. You want adventure? Go in and explore." I entered while carrying a small flashlight, and the atmosphere was very stuffy, as if you were in a place where time was trapped. The narrow corridors and huge walls gave you the feeling that you were trapped, but curiosity made me continue. As I walked inside, I began to feel I felt strange, as if someone was following me. At first, I thought it was the effect of the place, but with every step I took, I heard the sound of other footsteps, very light but real. I reached the Queen's room. The place was completely dark, but as soon as I entered, I felt very cold, as if someone had turned on the air conditioner in the middle of the desert. While I was trying to see the engravings on the walls, I heard a faint voice, like a distant whisper. "Why did you come?" At that moment, I began to feel that something was wrong. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but when I looked at the flashlight, I found the light suddenly weakening, as if the battery was running out. At that moment, I felt something pass by my ear, a cold wind, and with it a sound like a heavy sigh. I ran quickly towards the main corridor, but the path seemed to change. The corridors I entered from changed, and the walls became close to me in a way that suffocated you. Suddenly, while I was trying to find the way, I saw a tall shadow standing at the end of the corridor. I can't describe his appearance, but he looked like a person, very tall, and his features were not clear. The strange thing is that this shadow was not fixed. It was approaching me slowly, and the closer I got, the colder it was. I tried to step back, but my legs were frozen in place. All I heard was a voice saying, "Go back before it's too late." At that moment, the flashlight fell from my hand, and everything around me became pitch black. I could hear my heartbeat clearly, and suddenly I felt a cold touch on my shoulder. I don't know how, but I was able to move and run towards the exit. When I got out, I found the man who let me in waiting for me, but he was very nervous, and he said to me, "What happened inside? Your face is white as wax." I couldn't tell him. All I wanted to do was get away from this place as quickly as possible, questions running through my mind. As I thought about what happened, I started asking myself, does what happened to me in the pyramid have anything to do with what happened to me in Upper Egypt? Is this just a coincidence, or are these places really connected to something bigger than me and you? So if this is a curse, why is this happening to me specifically? Is there any of you who can take an adventure like this, or am I really crazy? All I know is that curiosity sometimes costs us dearly, and I often paid the price. But you, if you were in my place, would you have intervened? Tell me your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see the upcoming stories.